Hello and welcome to the CXO Show, the podcast for C-suite sales and marketing leaders. I'm Joe Birkedale, founder and CEO of Project 36, the strategic marketing agency behind the CXO Show. And in today's episode, we're looking at poor sales and marketing alignment, specifically the critical influence that sales and marketing alignment has on lead conversion. And to discuss this, I have with me my special guest, a fellow podcaster who's also a co-presenter for Love Sport Radio, in addition to his full-time day job as marketing director for Lace Partners. So Chris Howard, welcome to the CXO Show.
Thank you very much, Joe. Thank you very much for having me on.
No problem at all. Now, Chris, before we dive into your role at Lace Partners and how you've overcome poor sales and marketing alignment at various times in your career, I think we need to touch on your role at Love Sport. I glanced over it just now in the intro, but how on earth did you get into that and what's that like?
Yeah, it's funny. So I'm actually, I do marketing for a career, obviously. I've been writing about a beloved football team, although they're much maligned these days, which is Arsenal.
We've lost half our listeners now.
Yeah, exactly. Probably people cheering into their microphones or cheering into their earphones. But yeah, I have been blogging for probably about 11 or 12 years now about Arsenal. I write a daily blog. I've appeared on multiple podcasts, and a friend of mine who also writes his own blog and has written a couple of books actually got a call from Love Sport because they were looking to do a fan show, and they asked myself and my friend Dave and a friend of ours Giles to go on. So there's three of us that started off the show. We do that on Monday nights on Love Sport Radio from 7 till 8 p.m. So we talk about everything Arsenal related for our sins. And as you can imagine, of recent times, it's not been the funnest of podcasts and also radio shows, because it is actually also turned into a podcast as well.
That's pretty cool. I bet it divides opinion quite a bit there.
Yeah, it certainly does.
All right. So back to why you're here with us today on the CXO Show. And obviously that's to discuss the issue that's actually really common in lots of organizations, and that is poor sales and marketing alignment. So really, what's your understanding of sales marketing alignment and just how damaging can it be to lead conversion?
Yeah, well, I think it's the ongoing challenge that every marketeer faces, really, is making sure that you can have an appropriate level of alignment and making sure that you're able to articulate that as well. And I think when you get poor sales and marketing alignment, it massively affects the productivity, not just of the marketing team, but of the sales team as well. And I think what's really, really important, and I'll probably be referring back to this a number of times during the podcast, is this idea of communication. Because when communication works well and when both teams are aligned, then you're sort of pulling in the same direction, and you can be more successful in the same direction. But actually the communication goes down to understanding what the objectives are of the two teams as well. And if marketeers can understand the objectives and what sales guys and girls are trying to do, then that will help them in articulating their value, their vision. But actually also, if salespeople understand what marketing guys are trying to do, which often underpins what the sales team does, then they can start to work together as well. So when they both see the value, you're going to inevitably get that lead conversion, because ultimately good marketing, certainly from my perspective and in my history and my career, good marketing is about delivering the underpinning value and the warming up of any lead generation that you get. And I think the best example I could probably give is my time working at a life sciences organization, life sciences recruitment agency, about 3 or 4 years ago. I remember standing in front of the entire business as we did our regular sort of sales meetings and having a conversation with them, talking to them about the fact that they are, as a collective, the sales team, and there was a sales team of about 40, 45 people, they are the extension of my marketing team and the brand itself. And I remember getting a few looks from people because, you've got salespeople that are on the phone all the time. They're trying to talk to candidates. They're trying to talk to clients. They're trying to win new business from clients. They're trying to find new candidates, sourcing all of the time. And I remember a few of them looking at each other a little bit blankly. But when I actually explained to them that if you think that marketing is about multiple channels, it's about email, it's about social media, it's about website, but actually it's also about the spoken word as well. And you guys on that sales floor speak to your candidates and you speak to your clients every single day. So you are representing our brand that we have as a business. And so that's why it's my job to help you to be able to articulate that brand and what we stand for and the values that we have. If you can start to get across to salespeople, if you can start to get across to the sales team that what I'm doing is underpinning the work that you do, and if I do a good job, people are going to recognize and be more willing to pick up the phone to you, then that has a really super benefit for them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a natural codependence, yet it's not always seen as that.
100%.
And with the alignment, we've seen it countless times with being working in agencies, and you go and visit clients, and you get a feel for the culture. And you get some companies that are very, very sales orientated. Perhaps the sales department was there first. They've grown naturally through that, and marketing's come along later. And there's an imbalance in the boardroom where sales got a louder share of either pocket or voice. So you get this imbalance. And I think it's that alignment which is critical. And I can remember being at one client who shall remain nameless, and I was talking to the marketing team about an ABM program, and they were saying, yeah, we've got total alignment from the top to the bottom of the organisation. ABM's the way forward. When the active CEO walked through with an investor and was looking at all the different departments and introduced the marketing team in a large open plan office as the colouring in department.
Yep.
And
I've heard that one before.
Yeah, and whilst it's funny and it's all ha ha ha, that's really damaging. And actually the culture within an organisation, we went on to uncover that actually there wasn't sales and marketing alignment. There wasn't very much respect for the marketing's capability or its need within the organisation because it had been very sales led. And actually when we drilled into it, the lead gen and the demand was fantastic. And sales teams were closing that demand really well. But of course, the KPIs and the metrics weren't measured appropriately. So sales were getting all the glory, and marketing was getting referred to as the colouring in department.
And I think that's a communication thing, isn't it? And that's the key thing for me. And it's communication at the top level as well. So if you have a strong marketing leader and you have a strong sales leader, and both of them are aligned and both of them are on the same sort of page and understand the value that each one brings, then you can cascade that down through the business, through the teams themselves, and then you get teams working together as well. I had a very similar situation when I was working at the REC, Recruitment and Employment Confederation, in that the head of sales and myself forged a very, very close relationship. And it was because of that relationship that we were able to cascade the value of each team down to each other's departments. And that was massive for us, because what it then got is it got the marketing team talking to the sales team. Where are you generating this deal that we did? Where did that come from? Oh, that was a telephone call. Yeah, but whereabouts did that call? Let's drill down to the nub of it, of where you actually got that value from. And this is, again, a similar situation I had when I was working at the life sciences recruitment business that I worked in. I remember having conversations with sales guys saying, look, the reason why I'm trying to drill down to the nth degree as to where we're getting these leads from, that's purely and simply down to where can I spend my marketing budget that's going to help you to make your job easier. So yeah, definitely. Communication, I think, is a key thing, and also from that top-down sort of leading from the front type approach. And like you said, that CEO that's being so dismissive of the marketing team, that's not going to add any value from a marketing perspective. But actually, also, you've got to then ask, did that marketing team do enough to champion the work that they did, across the business?
Absolutely. I mean, you touched on it briefly a few minutes ago, and I want to come back onto that. And so I want to talk specifically about this notion that you'd already touched on of sales as an extension of brand or extension of marketing. So how do you go about that, and how does that affect lead conversion and opportunity conversion?
Yeah, so I think, as you said, I've touched on that a little bit with regards to the way in which you talk to your sales team, the way in which you are able to communicate to your sales team. You have to be able to find advocates within the sales team as well. I think that's one way in which we're able I was able to build on, being able to trace lead conversion. That's fundamental from my perspective, is build advocates within your particular business that understand the value that you can bring. From a Lay's partners perspective, it has to come from the top as well. So the lead conversion side of it, for us, it's about being very, very close and getting the senior management to see the value of the marketing effort that you do. But tracking it is really important as well. And if I think about, again, I go back to my time when I was at the life sciences recruitment business, we were able to track absolutely everything. And the reason we were able to track everything was because we were able to get systems in place properly. So we were able to track candidates, making sure that you're getting the sales management team to be able to get their sales guys to effectively track exactly where their candidates come from, getting them to talk about where they're, when they've had client meetings, where have they come from. And that's not, part of it was actually, sometimes it is just a manual task. It is about being able to get across to the teams, be able to have those sales management meetings and say, let's start to interrogate the data and work out where this came from, because the reason we want to find this information out is because if we're doing something from a marketing perspective, we're focused on a job board or we're focused on a particular piece of social media that's working, we want to do more of that. So I think that's key from a sales perspective, from a getting them to understand that they are the extension of the marketing team.
Yeah, no, I think they're relevant points, and I think one of the roles that I get brought in as CEO of Project 36, we're predominantly an account-based marketing agency. So one of the big requests that we have to do is to go in and help streamline and understand that sales and marketing alignment. And one of the very simple things that we do that's just not done in a lot of organizations is actually show the salespeople the marketing assets and the marketing playbook that's in place. So when they get a lead that pops up in Salesforce or an MQL that's come out of HubSpot or whatever platform they're using, that becomes a marketing qualified or a sales qualified lead, what's happened to that lead beforehand is really important. So that the amount of time that's been invested, has that lead been on a webinar, for example? Have they consumed a white paper? Have they looked at an infographic? Have they joined a podcast? So if the salespeople understand the upstream effort that not only has marketing gone to deliver this opportunity, but also what hoops the lead has gone through, how much time and engagement they've spent educating themselves to this point where they're now hopefully at a position to buy. We find that once that's mapped out and sales have got a bit of context and visibility as to what's coming, then they respond better to the leads that they have.
Yeah,
and they become an extension of that marketing team from that point of view.
Yeah, what I'd also probably say is, for me, articulating the concept of the sales funnel as well, particularly when you're in more traditional businesses as my one, like recruitment, that's been really, really important. The lead generation funnel from it. I remember talking to an old school recruiter and him thinking that marketing is effectively the guys that create the business cards for you, and saying, well, what about if I could produce you a candidate or a client that you never even heard about, but they know about you. They know about us as a business, and they know about us as a business because, like you just said, they've downloaded a white paper or they've listened to a piece of a webinar or what have you, and so they're warmed up. And I can hand you that warmed up person that says, "Oh yeah, I know about you guys. Oh, okay, tell me a little bit more," as opposed to you going in cold. And I remember having that conversation with this old school recruiter, and it was like the light bulb going on, and that was almost like my blueprint for, right, if I can have that conversation with you, I need to have that conversation across the whole business and cascade that down through the different sales teams. Then you've got your extension of marketing as a brand, and they get it too.
Yeah. And those light bulb moments, they come when you get a good teacher who can explain you something, whether you're back at school or university, and all of a sudden the concept drops, like economics. So I had a really good economics teacher, and he was able to visually get into my mind the concept he was talking about. And from that moment on, I got it. So if we take on board that sales and sales teams and salespeople can and probably should become an extension of marketing, is there an argument that we need to upskill sales as storytellers? Do we need to formally train them, or do we just empower them with information and then let them do the storytelling in their own way?
I think You sort of touched on it there a second ago when you were talking about like being a good teacher, and perhaps there's an element of marketeers needing to be the teachers for this particular concept of storytelling. And I absolutely love this. I love this idea of getting salespeople to tell the story, because again, like I just said, if you can explain to them the value, the reason why you're telling this story, the reason why you're giving the background to us as a business, the reason why you're trying to articulate our values as a business is not just because there's some words written down on the wall that you've been mandated that you have to talk about. It's because people want to hear. People buy from people. Oldest cliche in the world, but if people buy from people, what do people like listening to? Well, they like hearing about stories because they can have empathy, they can have an understanding, and they can relate. So if you can actually meet somebody on their level, if you can understand that if you can explain to them that you understand their challenges, and if you can do it through articulating your story to them, this is us as a business, this is the story that we've been on, this is why we can help you because we have that kind of understanding of you guys because we've worked with other people like you. That's the story, that's the journey that as a salesperson you have to take your customer on. And that's why, again, we need to, as you just said, we need to upskill salespeople so that they take on that mindset. They're not just selling them, a product or a service. They're selling a story as well, and people will buy from that story because that's what people want to hear.
Well, absolutely, and you only have to look at the Christmas ads for John Lewis and whoever they put across a story. The product kind of comes last. Yep. It's very much the story, and people they actively look forward to being sold to in that scenario. Mm-hmm. So that's the lesson we can all take away, is that the consumer advertising around storytelling is so powerful. Mm-hmm. So, Chris, as you know, our audience here on the CXO show is predominantly C-suite, sales and marketing C-suite, and they've likely got there over time through career progression. But when you're at the top, you see everything from that aerial perspective. You see the whole picture. So you've got the strategy in one hand, you've got the direction of the board and knowing where the business needs to go. You've got the budgets, of course, and then you've got all the politics at play. But that's not necessarily true when you're at the coalface. So simply saying, right, sales and marketing alignment is important. You two, you get along. It doesn't necessarily resonate with the BDR or the SDR or the marketing account manager, as they've naturally got their own perspective. They've got their own to-do lists, their targets, their KPIs. They're potentially rewarded on conflicting KPIs as well, particularly with sales. So articulating the message and actually getting buy-in and response from those required is actually easier said than done. And it's the age-old management problem of getting things actually done. And that's kind of why I'm a big believer that if you've got context, if they can understand why their role or why I need them to act such a way in their role is instrumental in somebody else's goals and vice versa, that together they are both, whether they be individuals or a team, they're all going to be pulling in the same direction, and that organizationally results will happen, which in turn rewards everybody. So those results can be bigger, better, faster when aligned. But what would you say is the best way of achieving this when trying to align sales and marketing teams?
That's an interesting one. Well, I sort of touched on it beforehand, but I think when you can properly articulate the entire process of the sales funnel, it makes a massive difference to both sales and marketing teams. Most sales teams don't really, appreciate from my experience, shall I say, most sales teams don't always appreciate the sales funnel. When I first got into businesses, they believe that obviously their part of it is I'm KPI'd on X, Y, and Z. If I've got to make X number of calls, or I've got to deliver X amount of revenue. And I think when you can explain to somebody that there are other things that you can do that can get to your end objective, which as a business is for us to make sales in whatever product or whatever service, if you can effectively articulate that, and I will say that it's marketing's job to do that as well, to show the value, then then those salespeople can be brought on the journey with you. We produce content at Lace Partners. We produce a lot of content at Lace Partners. And the reason why we produce that content is to demonstrate that we're thought leaders. And the reason why we want to demonstrate that we're thought leaders is because we want HR directors, or we want senior people to see, look, they know what they're talking about, and we can see the value in working with them. We don't just send our exec team and our sales team out to hit the phones and make as many calls as possible. It doesn't work unless people have been warmed up for us and the services that we provide. So for us, that warming process, by demonstrating our value, by showing the whole length of the sales funnel, and also getting everybody involved in that process as well. Again, we talked about communication. It's really important that you're communicating to salespeople. The reason we're doing this is to help you. The reason we are trying to add this value is so that we are warming this up for you, so that you can go into those conversations knowing that you have a whole, forgive my use of the word arsenal, given that I talked about the podcast earlier that I do, but you have all of these different elements in your arsenal that to then talk to your clients or your customers for. That's the value of the sales funnel. But what's also important is making sure that people understand that not everybody's ready to buy at the point in which you pick up the phone to them, or at the point in which you initially contact them. And if you can articulate that to salespeople properly, and if they get it, then they understand that it may not be a sale today, but it might be a sale tomorrow.
I want to touch on that, and that's where, in dealing with sales and marketing alignment, there's KPIs that you can align. Of course, there's messaging and communication, which is very, very important. And sales, don't forget, they can be very quick to react. They can jump on and satisfy demand once they've got it quite quickly. But in terms of generating that demand, specifically in the larger, more complex sort of enterprise level businesses that Project 36 tends to work with, the lead times from an inquiry to order can be many months, sometimes years. Which is why that we help them create this always-on feed of content, thought leadership, engagement, and targeting via, inbound marketing, HubSpot, etc. But also, very significantly, account-based marketing. So, how do you think it's best to align sales and marketing when those lead times can be very, very long?
Yeah, well, again, it's about being able to understand that today's contact can lead to so much more in the future, but actually then it's about having a proper understanding and being a bit more strategic about your pipeline, and understanding that if you can go into the nub of, and if you can get the data on how long your pipeline times are, and you understand as a business that perhaps it might take you 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, maybe even 2 years. And we get this as a consultancy. We have conversations with people that are not in the position where they're interested in purchasing or making any kind of agreement to work with us at this point in time, because they're not ready. Perhaps they are looking at their HR transformation, and they're not in a position where they as a business can really look at any kind of transformation programs for 18 months. Maybe it's a new HRD that's only just gone into the business. So for us, what's important is that we keep close to that person, keep close to those companies, and just keep reminding them that actually, we're there when you're ready for us. And you take people through that funnel process, which is, you have that initial, you establish your credibility, you have the initial understanding as to what their challenges are. You demonstrate that you can actually help with those challenges. But also what we've found as a business is successful is not the hard sell. It's the, look, when you're ready to talk to us, you talk to us. In the meantime, we're going to keep providing you. We're going to keep furnishing you with information. We're going to keep supporting you. We're going to keep giving you advice, guidance. We provide thought leadership, white papers. We'll run webinars. We'll run podcasts. We'll give you a whole host of channels in which you can, learn more as an individual. And then when you're ready to call on us, then we'll be there. And what we then find is just bringing those types of people along the funnel. We might find that we bring somebody from, initial contact through to being an actual advocate of our business without actually having worked with us. But when they do get to the point where they are ready, if they're an advocate, then it's a no-brainer. And they because we have that advocacy, they're just ready to work with us. But if we push people as far along the funnel as possible to the point in which they're ready to buy from us, when they're further along that funnel, then that lead time, when it becomes right, I've now got the budget, I now want to do this program, I'm going to call on you guys, Lace Partners, in this instance, in my current role, of course, then it becomes a lot quicker conversation. And that's when, from a sales point of view, it becomes a lot easier, because it's then not just, you don't just have to jump through the hoops of demonstrating your value, because you've already done that further down the sales funnel.
Yeah, you're empowering and informing rather than selling, and it's a cultural switch. If you give somebody all the information that they need, and it becomes a no-brainer, why wouldn't they? So provided it's the right time, then it can work. We're in exactly the same process. We're looking for some business support services at the moment, and I found the supplier, and I've known about the supplier that I want to work with for a long, long time. We are not ready for them as an agency yet. So they've reached down and said, look, yeah, let's work together. And we realised that we're not quite there yet. So they're still very much on our agenda to work with, but not for maybe 12 to 18 months. And
do you know what's amazing? Do you know what I find amazing? The number of companies that don't actually go through this process, this kind of constant engagement process. The amount of, I'm a marketing director. We often require services of a variety of different supplier companies. We're not a massive company, but we still require services of companies. And I will reach out to somebody if I'm on the verge of looking for, website redevelopment, or if we're looking at engaging some kind of telemarketing campaign. But it's amazing the amount of companies that I will have reached out to a couple of years ago when working at other companies that, as far as I'm concerned, I've dropped off their radar because they just haven't bothered to just keep in contact with me. And sometimes that's all you need, that constant contact. I'm a purchaser, and I understand that, I'm not always going to be able to make certain purchases at certain times. But what amazes me is that, I am somebody that has a budget, and I can use that budget in certain areas, but when I'm ready to use it, and there are so many companies out there that I see that don't actually just engage a very basic level of, account management of prospecting. And you must see it all the time, I'd imagine.
Oh, all the time. And this is where we get into this very heavy sales influence within an organization. And that is sell, close, close, close. If you're not closing, you're not winning. And it's that type of organization. They tend to have, in our experience, SDRs and fixed business processes, even scripts sometimes. And therefore, if it doesn't fit the script, it doesn't work. We had inquiries coming in for some of our one of our financial services clients where the business development rep could only work with inquiry coming from a certain postcode. And if they're outside of that postcode, they had to pass it to the next rep and so on. So we were driving inquiry in, and we didn't at that time have that visibility. We were just told, go and get inquiry to make that phone ring. The phone would ring, business rep would take the quote. And one of the first questions is, what's your postcode? And when we recorded some of these calls for training and listening back, if it wasn't their postcode of interest, they were like, oh, so-and-so is your contact. They're on the phone. I'll get them to phone you back, and just drop the phone. Because they were so heavily targeted on closing and time on phone and opportunity. There wasn't any passing business referral targets. There wasn't any script that went outside of that. So when we listened to it back, we were like, wow, it's 25 calls today where that's happened. Those 25 people didn't phone back, and they weren't contacted. They are not customers, and they would have probably been customers. So having that visibility and understanding the KPIs, very, very early on in my career, I was a product marketing manager for a large distribution company. And we would, within channel marketing, so we would reach out to the manufacturers and say, like, we want to put this marketing campaign together to help shift this through the channel. I want 50, 80, 100 grand marketing budget over the next quarter to push it. So we'd go to the likes of HP and whatever and say, this is the program. They come back and say, that's fine, we'll give you that money, but we want you to buy 2 million quid's worth of stock now to support it. So we'd then turn around to purchasing and go, right, we've got this money going to come in for this marketing campaign, but you need to buy this 2 million quid. But by doing so, we'll hit our rebate target. So it's all very complicated, and we'd get all this money coming in. Purchasing would come back with a flat no. And when we got to the bottom of why, they were being incentivized on having as little inventory on shelf as possible. for every pound that wasn't tied up in stock, they would get a percentage bonus. So physically, by having stock, which obviously is that what then people need to sell, because if it isn't in stock, they wouldn't buy it in the distribution channel because of just in time, etc. So we as an organisation have crippled ourselves. We've got all these great marketing rebates and campaigns and projects going, and the suppliers are really happy to support us, but we wouldn't buy the product. So once we were able to show that to the CEO and go, look, there's a misalignment of KPIs here, the problem went away and growth ensued. And it was nothing new, it was just KPIs were realigned. And there's a lot to be said about job share.
Oh, yes.
Understanding, getting one of my suppliers, they brought in their marketing team to sit on their phones and said, right, you've got to make 25 cold calls today. And they realized very quickly it's not very nice. And they had appreciation and respect for the SDRs. And by the same token, they stuck the SDRs in the marketing department. And they realized very quickly it's not about colouring in pictures. So there was this handover of respect where when one said something needs to be done, the other listened. And it comes back to that customer value journey, I guess, where you understand how long it might take, but also the part that you can play at the right time. We quite often, particularly with account-based marketing, when we're working with sales and marketing, it will fall down unless there's no sales and marketing alignment. So this subject matter is quite important for us as an agency as well. And we quite often put in place SLA agreements between sales and marketing. So marketing are going to deliver X, and sales are going to respond in such a way, in such a time scale, and report back in such a way. So it's a good process to go through.
Yeah, and if you put yourself into the customer's position in that instance as well, person passively reads something about a white paper and downloads it. If they get a phone call within a minute, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, even a few days, well, maybe not within a few days, but certainly within 24 hours. I don't know, it feels a little bit contrived. It feels a little bit, it kind of erodes a bit of, I would say it erodes a little bit of trust, because the first thing that you do as a recipient of that white paper is start to think, next time you download a white paper, you think, oh, I'm just going to get a phone call, aren't I? I'm going to get badgered. And again, it comes back to where am I in the stage of my buying process? And just because you're downloading, again, it's being able to understand that, and what stage of the customer value journey am I? Am I at purchasing stage? Possibly not. Just downloading a white paper does not equal purchasing. If I've downloaded a white paper, if I've visited the website, and if you have the right sort of search tracking and data tracking within your website, and you're using the right automation platform, then you can obviously start to track some of this. But if you've got somebody that's downloaded a white paper versus somebody that's downloaded a white paper, has logged into a webinar, has visited your website 6 times in the last 3 days, it's probably within your rights to be able to hand that over to the sales guy and say, you might want to just phone them up and say, can I help you? Are you all right? How are you doing? Do you need any support with anything? Because they're probably looking for something, and they're probably going to reach out, and they'll probably be in a better stage of needing you for something. If you've got somebody that's just read something that you've produced because they think the content's quite interesting, again, you're at a very different stage in your customer purchasing or your value journey.
Absolutely. And it depends very much on what you sell. If you've got a very complex, customized, solution-led offering that needs human interaction, it needs human customization, it's expensive, then if they're downloading a white paper, they're at the awareness and consideration stages. If they're chatting to you on a chatbot on your website, and you've got a solution which is £15 a month, that is much more likely to mean they want to buy straight away. They're actively engaging with you two-way straight from the get-go. If they're downloading the long format content, they need to read that. So phoning them in 5 minutes after they've downloaded it is pointless. But like you said, they're at the wrong stage anyway. And so you need to understand your own business. You need to understand the asset that the prospect is engaged with, and it all needs to be mapped out. And that's where that SLA can come in. And usually the best way is just don't show sales that lead until it's hit a mutually agreed lead score, and then pass it over. All right. So every episode of the CXO show, we ask our guests to give us 4 or 5 top tips, pro tips, some takeaway pieces of info that other sales and marketing leaders can then think about, adapt, and possibly even adopt into their own specific scenarios? So with that in mind, Chris, what are your top tips for improving sales and marketing alignment?
Get yourself aligned with the leaders within the business and the sales leaders and the marketing leaders within the business. Get those two together so that they can understand what the common goals are. And that can even start with even just sitting down and starting to map out, right, what are the objectives of your team? What have you guys got to do to be successful in sales? And what have you guys got to do in marketing to be successful? Because then once you understand each other's goals and objectives, then it's a lot easier to be aligned. So, getting myself, very close to the head of sales and to the sales director, commercial director, that sort of stuff has been invaluable. So I'd say that's one point. From a social side of it as well, that it helped that, funnily enough, when I was at the REC, the head of sales was also an Arsenal fan, so we had plenty to talk about. But we used to get together ourselves to talk, ideas and strategies and what we wanted to do. But actually, because our teams saw that we were so aligned, they started to forge little sort of networks amongst themselves. And we encouraged that. So it's about encouraging your teams to do it. So it's all very well, myself as a head of marketing or marketing director being close to head of sales or sales director. But ultimately, you need to then make sure that you can cascade that down. So building a bit of camaraderie in the teams worked as well. We used to go away. I used to take my team away for off-sites at least twice a year, where we go through our marketing plan, review it, analyze it, see where we're at. But actually, I'd also get the sales guys along towards the end of those day off-sites that we'd have, so that the team can present to them and tell them about our ideas. And then we'd all go to the pub afterwards and have a few drinks. And then you start to build more of a rapport. And actually, what I then found was that my marketing team they were going to the sales guys just off their own back to start tracing, where leads have come from, so that we could start being more successful in the marketing that we were doing, which was really, really useful. Get the quick wins. So from my perspective, whenever I join an organization, start to look at where you can get close to the sales guys and where you can demonstrate value to them. If you can go into an organization and demonstrate very, very quickly, okay, this is what I can do for you, these are the things that I'm going to do for you, and be successful with you very, very quickly, then you're going to build that advocacy. And that's another key thing, which I'd probably say as my fourth point, is find advocates within the business. The first thing I did when I joined, when I've joined the last two recruitment businesses that I've worked at, is a bit of a analysis of who the people are within the business that really are and willing to embrace marketing more than others, and then find those individuals that are of a certain sort of seniority as well, because that helps, and get them on board as advocates. Once you've got individuals in the business that are advocates, and if you can demonstrate value for them, then their peers will see, oh, hold on a second, the marketing team are helping their lead generation. No, I want a piece of that as well. So
that's brilliant. And I think on the quick wins one, whenever I've gone into an organization, I've always gone in with at least a 90-day plan before I've started, as to what I wanted to implement and cascade that through the organization very, very quickly, because you've only got a certain amount of time to make a difference before you get swallowed up into the existing culture that's there.
yes.
So where that's relevant when you're starting out and starting into a new role, getting the quick wins is really easy to do. Actually, if you're an established marketing leader or an established sales leader and you need to get those quick wins in, you can actually do a reset. You can relaunch your own department within the organization. So, if you've been a marketing director for 3 or 4 years, you need to kick it up. You've got some new ideas. You want to do new strategies. You want to align sales and marketing better. There's no shame in relaunching, almost as an internal agency within your own business, as marketing is going to have a relaunch or even a rebrand. That gives you the opportunity to get those quick wins done. Here's some quick tactical work that we're going to get done over the next quarter, and here's our strategic plan. You're re-announcing yourself with intent, with gusto and energy, and that can be really powerful for both sales and the marketing department. So sales can do the same. Look, we've got this new strategy. This is how we're going to relaunch it. This is how we're going to go. So, your 4 tips there, leadership alignment, be social, get the quick wins, and find advocates are really, really, really good there. Have you got any of those, silver bullet that you'd want to throw in there?
It's a personal thing more than anything else. I feel like I should have perhaps embraced digital a little bit quicker than I did. I mean, we, as a business at Lace Partners, we get involved with digital. So when I say digital, I'm talking about, the paid for PPC search, targeting people through LinkedIn and channels like that. From that perspective, we've had a lot of success in Lace over the last 6 months in finding people and engaging with people and starting them on their journey, their value journey with us through some sponsored advertising, sponsored emailing within LinkedIn. That's quite a tactical thing, but overall, I think taking more risk is important. Try things. If I could go back in 5 years' time, or even 5 years' time, or 10 years ago, I would have said embrace trying more things through digital a little bit quicker, because I'd probably be further along the line than I am at the moment.
Okay, so there you have it, direct from Chris, his top tips as to how you can align sales and marketing in your organisation with a view to closing those sales leads, and a bit of a silver bullet at the end as to perhaps take a few more calculated risks. So that brings us to the close of today's podcast. A huge thank you to my guest, Chris Howard, and to Lace Partners for freeing up his and their time to come on today. So Chris, thank you very much for coming in. Remember to check back for the next episode and to subscribe to the podcast via your favourite app. We're on Spotify, Apple, Google, TuneIn, and loads more. You can also check us online at thecxo.show, where you can see a schedule of upcoming episodes, guest speakers, recordings of previous episodes, and even submit your suggestions for topics that we should be covering. So head to thecxo.show to find out more. The CXO show is recorded, produced and managed by project36.io. And what you might not know is that this podcast has a video companion and a series to support it. So built and produced with our video and webinar partners at 23.net. Video of this episode features closed caption subtitles so you can read along without needing speakers or headphones, and also features extra information like links to resources and other content assets as mentioned in the episodes. The videos are available now, so please check it out at thecxo.show. Until next time, goodbye and thanks for tuning in.